The Harmony Ring was the biggest space station had ever seen. It floated in the darkness between 3 solar systems, spinning slowly like a giant wheel made of metal and glass. Thousands of beings lived here. Some had 2 legs. Some had 6. Some had no legs at all and moved by floating or sliding. The station was built for everyone, and that made everything complicated. Stood by the window of her small room and watched the stars. She had been here for 3 galactic months now. Back on Earth, she had been a kindergarten teacher. She had spent 7 years teaching small children how to tie their shoes, how to share their toys, and how to be kind to each other. She thought she knew what hard work looked like. She was wrong. A soft knock came from her door. She turned and pressed the button to open it, stood there holding 2 cups of hot tea. He was tall and thin, with tired eyes and messy hair. Before coming to the station, he had been a military engineer. He built machines that could survive in the coldest parts of space. Now he helped take care of children. "You should sleep," said. He handed her one of the cups. "I cannot sleep," replied. "They arrive tomorrow." Nodded slowly. He understood. Tomorrow, the first group of alien children would come to the 4 cubs from 4 different species. None of them had ever met a human before. None of them had ever played together. The whole galaxy was watching to see what would happen. "Do you think this will work?" asked. Took a sip of her tea. It was warm and sweet. "I do not know," she said honestly, "but we have to try." The Cooperation Council had come up with the idea. For hundreds of years, the different alien species had fought wars, made treaties, broken those treaties, and fought more wars. The adults could not trust each other, so someone suggested starting with the children. If the young ones grew up together, maybe they would learn to see each other as friends instead of enemies. It was a beautiful idea. It was also terrifying. Had read all the files. She had studied each species for weeks, but reading about someone and meeting them were 2 very different things. The morning came too fast. Put on her best clothes, a simple blue uniform with the symbol on the shoulder. Wore the same thing. They walked together through the long hallways of the station until they reached the arrival area. Commander was already waiting there. She was a stern woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She ran the entire station, and she did not smile very often. "The ships are landing now," Commander said. Her voice was cold. "I want you to understand something. Many people think this program is a waste of time. Many people think it will fail. If anything goes wrong, they will blame you." Bowed her head politely. "I understand, Commander." "Good," turned and walked away without another word. Leaned close to. "She seems friendly," he whispered. Almost laughed, almost. The first ship landed with a soft hum. The door opened and a tall alien stepped out. It had blue skin, 6 arms, and 2 long antennae on its head. This was Elder, a diplomat from the people. In one of his many arms, he held a small bundle of fur. The bundle moved. 2 big eyes peeked out. This was Elder's child. Was covered in soft white fur. She had 6 tiny arms, just like her parent, and her antenna twitched nervously as she looked around. She made a small chirping sound and hid her face against chest. "Greetings," Elder said. His voice was deep and smooth. "This is my daughter. She is shy." Smiled warmly. "Hello, my name is. I am very happy to meet you." Peeked out again. Her big eyes studied his face. Then she made another chirping sound, softer this time. More ships landed. More parents arrived with their children. From the second ship came a family. The people lived underwater on their home planet. They had smooth green skin, webbed fingers, and gills on their necks. The cub's name was. She walked with her chin held high, trying to look brave, but her webbed hands were shaking. The third ship brought a cub named. The looked like big cats with silver fur and large ears. Was small for his age, and he kept looking at the ground. When knelt down to greet him, she noticed that his claws kept sliding in and out of his paws. He could not control them. "Sorry," whispered. His voice was so quiet could barely hear it. "My claws do that when I am nervous." "That is okay," said gently. "Everyone gets nervous sometimes." The last ship was late. When it finally landed, a round, bouncy creature rolled out before the door had fully opened. This was a cub. The people were soft and round like living balls of energy, could not stand still for even 1 second. He bounced up and down, rolled in circles, and made happy squeaking sounds. His parent chased after him, looking exhausted. "I am so sorry," the parent said. "He is always like this." Watch bounce past her 3 times. "I can see that," she said with a smile. The parents did not stay long. They had meetings to attend, treaties to discuss, important work to do. One by one, they said goodbye to their children and left. And then it was just and 4 very different cubs. The playroom was big and bright. The walls were painted with pictures of stars and planets. There were soft mats on the floor and toys on every shelf. Had worked hard to make it feel safe and warm. But the cubs did not play. They did not even move. They stood in 4 different corners of the room, as far from each other as possible, hid behind a chair, crossed her arms and stared at the wall, sat in a corner with his ears flat against his head, was the only one still moving, but even he stayed on his side of the room. Leaned toward, "This might be harder than we thought." Nodded, but she did not feel afraid. She had seen this before many times. On her first day as a teacher the children had been just as scared. They had not known each other. They had not trusted each other. But by the end of the year, they were friends. She just needed time, and patience, and maybe a little luck. A message appeared on her tablet. She looked down and read it. Her heart sank. "What is it?" asked. "Winter protocol," said. "The station's outer rings will drop to low temperatures next week for maintenance. All residents must wear thermal protection." She looked at the cubs. Then she looked at the supply closet where the thermal coats were stored. The coats had buttons, big, round buttons that needed to be pushed through small holes. On Earth, every child learned to button a coat. It was simple. It was easy. But these were not Earth children. Took a deep breath. "Well," she said quietly to herself, "this should be interesting." She had no idea how right she was. 3 days passed before felt ready to try the coats. In those 3 days, she learned many things about the cubs. She learned that liked to hide in small spaces when she felt scared. She learned that pretended to be angry when she was actually sad. She learned that claws came out whenever his heart beat too fast. And she learned that only stopped bouncing when he was asleep. The cubs still did not play together. They stayed in their own corners. They ate their meals alone. They looked at each other from across the room but never spoke. The distance between them felt like an ocean. But was patient. She had learned long ago that trust could not be rushed. On the morning of the 4th day, called all the cubs to the center of the playroom. Stood beside her, holding a translator device that turned her words into sounds each species could understand. "Good morning, everyone," said brightly. "Today, we are going to learn something new." The cubs looked at her with curious eyes. Even, who usually pretended not to care, leaned forward a little. Reached into a box and pulled out a coat. It was bright red, soft, and warm. On the front were 6 large buttons, shiny and round like little moons. "This is a thermal coat," explained. "Next week the station will become very cold. We all need to wear coats to stay warm, but first we need to learn how to put them on." She held the coat up so everyone could see. Then she pointed to one of the buttons. "This is called a button," she said slowly. "To close the coat, you push the button through this hole, like this." Placed her fingers on the button. She squeezed it gently, tilted it sideways, and pushed it through the hole on the other side of the coat. The button popped through and the coat was fastened. "See," she said with a smile, "simple." The cubs did not think it was simple. 6 arms waved in the air. Her antenna twisted with confusion. She made a series of chirping sounds that the translator turned into words. How did you do that? Your fingers moved so fast, I could not even see what happened. Gills fluttered. That looked like magic, she said. Her voice was suspicious, like she thought was playing a trick. His ears pressed flat. His claws slid out, then back in, then out again. I do not think I can do that, he whispered. Bounced in place. Can I eat the button? He asked. No, said quickly. You cannot eat the button. Tried not to laugh. She knelt down so she was at the same height as the cubs. I know it looks difficult, she said gently. But I promise you can learn, it just takes practice. She showed them again, this time moving her fingers very slowly. She explained each step. Pinch the button, tilt it, find the hole, push it through, pull it tight. The cubs watched with wide eyes. On Earth, children learned to button coats before they could even read. It was one of the first skills they mastered, had never thought about how complex it actually was. Her fingers knew exactly what to do without thinking, but for these cubs, every movement was new and strange. Now said, let us try together. She handed each cub a coat. The coats had been made special for them. His coat had 6 sleeves for her 6 arms. His coat had openings for her gills. His coat had soft padding around the chest so his claws would not tear the fabric. His coat was extra stretchy so it would not fall off when he bounced. Had spent 2 weeks building these coats. He was very proud of them. Held her coat carefully. She had so many arms, but none of them seemed to know what to do. She tried to copy what had shown her. She grabbed a button with her top right arm. She reached for the hole with her top left arm. But then her middle arms got in the way, and her bottom arms were holding the coat. Everything got tangled. This is impossible, chirped. Her antenna drooped with frustration. Tried next. Her webbed fingers were smooth and slippery. Every time she grabbed the button, it slid away. She squeezed harder, but that just made it worse. The button shot out of her grip and bounced across the floor. Stupid thing, growled. Her face turned a darker shade of green, which meant she was getting angry. Did not even try. He just sat there staring at his coat with sad eyes. My claws will break it, he said quietly. I will ruin everything. Was the only one who seemed happy. He had put the coat on his head like a hat and was bouncing around the room, squeaking with joy. He had not tried a single button. Watched the chaos and let out a long sigh. He walked over to and spoke in a low voice. Maybe we should give up on buttons. I can make coats with magnetic clips instead, or heat seal strips, something easier. Shook her head. No, they can do this. But why does it matter? Asked. A magnetic clip works just as well. Why make them struggle with buttons? Thought for a moment. She looked at the cubs, was sitting in a pile of tangled arms and fabric, was kicking her coat across the floor, had not moved at all, was still wearing his coat as a hat. Because, said slowly, buttons are not just about keeping coats closed. They are about learning that hard things become easy with practice. They are about not giving up. They are about believing in yourself even when something feels impossible. Raised an eyebrow. You learned all that from buttons. Smiled. I learned all that from teaching children. The buttons are just the beginning. She walked back to the center of the room. She clapped her hands gently to get the cubs' attention. Okay, everyone, I know that was difficult, but we are not going to give up. We are going to try again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, as many times as it takes. Looked up from her tangle. But what if we cannot do it? Then we will keep trying, said simply. I believe in you, all of you. The room was quiet. The cubs looked at each other, then back at. No one had ever said those words to them before. Not their parents, who expected them to be perfect. Not their teachers, who only cared about rules. This strange human woman with her soft voice and warm smile believed in them. It was a small thing, just a few words, but it planted a seed. Picked up her coat from the floor. She did not say anything, but she did not throw it away either. His claws slowly slid back into his paws. His ears lifted just a little. Even stopped bouncing for a moment. He took the coat off his head and held it properly for the first time. Made a small chirping sound. It was the word for okay. Felt warmth spread through her chest. This was why she had become a teacher. Not for the easy moments, but for the hard ones. Not for the children who already knew everything, but for the ones who thought they could never learn. "Same time tomorrow," she said. "Get some rest." The cubs walked back to their corners, but something had changed. The distance between them felt just a little bit smaller. And somewhere in her heart knew that the real lesson had nothing to do with buttons at all. The next morning arrived with soft golden light coming through the playroom windows. The stars outside had faded, replaced by the glow of a distant sun that the station was passing near. Like these moments, they reminded her of sunrise back home. The cubs arrived one by one. Came first, her 6 arms wrapped tightly around herself. Came next, walking slowly with her chin up. Followed behind her, staying close to the walls like a shadow. Rolled in last, bouncing off 2 chairs and a table before coming to a stop. Had set up a special area for today's lesson. 4 small mats sat in a circle on the floor. On each mat was a coat. Beside each coat was a bowl of treats, the favorite snack of each species. Had learned that a little reward could make hard work feel easier. "Welcome back," said warmly. "Today we try again, but this time we will go slowly, one button at a time, and remember there is no hurry." The cubs sat on their mats. They looked at their coats like the coats might bite them. Knelt beside, he was holding a small camera. "Commander asked me to record everything," he whispered, "for her reports." Nodded. She did not like being watched, but she understood. The whole station was waiting to see if this program would succeed or fail. Said, "Would you like to try first?" Santana drooped. She did not want to try first, but she did not want to say no either. Slowly, she picked up her coat. She had 6 arms. That should have made things easier, but it made things much, much harder. Her arms did not work together. When she told her top arms to grab the button, her middle arms tried to help, and her bottom arms pulled the coat in the wrong direction. "Focus on just 2 arms," suggested. "Let the other 4 rest." Tried, she really did. She held her bottom 4 arms against her body and used only her top 2. She pinched the button between her tiny fingers. She aimed for the hole. The button was too big. Her fingers were too small. The hole seemed to move every time she looked at it. She pushed and pushed, but the button would not go through. "I cannot do it," chirped. Her voice cracked with sadness. "My arms are not made for this." Moved closer. "May I help you?" Nodded, her antenna shaking. Placed her hands gently over small fingers. Together they pinched the button. Together they tilted it. Together they pushed. The button slipped through the hole. Gasped, her antenna shot straight up. "It worked, we did it." "You did it," corrected. "I just showed you how. The strength came from you." Looked at the button like it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. One button, just one, but it meant everything. "Can I try another?" she asked eagerly. "Of course, take your time." Had been watching from her mat. Her arms were crossed and her face showed no emotion, but her gills kept opening and closing quickly, which meant she was nervous. "I will try now," she announced. She did not want to be better than her. Grabbed her coat. Her webbed fingers spread wide around the button. She squeezed, but her fingers were too smooth. The button slipped sideways. She tried again. The button slipped again. She tried a 3rd time, squeezing so hard that her face turned dark green. The button shot out of her grip and flew across the room, bouncing off's head. "Ow," said, rubbing his forehead. "This is stupid," snapped. She threw her coat on the ground. "Why do we have to do this? On my planet we use water seals. They are better than buttons. Buttons are primitive." Did not get angry. She had heard words like this many times before. Children often said mean things when they felt embarrassed. "You are right," said calmly. "Water seals are very clever. Your people invented something amazing. But sometimes we learn new things just to understand how others live. It is not about which way is better. It is about trying something different. Gills slowed down. She looked at her coat on the ground. Then she looked at who was still working on her second button with a determined expression. Without saying a word, picked up her coat again. Had not moved from his mat. He was staring at his coat with wide, fearful eyes. His claws were out, scratching lines in the soft mat beneath him. Walked over and sat beside him. She did not say anything at first. She just sat there, quiet and calm. "I am scared," finally whispered. "What are you scared of?" asked gently. "My claws." He held up his paws. The sharp claws glinted in the light. "They break things. They always break things. If I touch the coat, I will tear it. Then everyone will be angry at me." Looked at his claws. They were sharp, yes, but they were also beautiful, curved like little moons. "Has anyone ever shown you how to use your claws carefully?" she asked. Shook his head. "Everyone just tells me to hide them, to keep them inside, but I cannot control when they come out." Thought for a moment, then she had an idea. "What if your claws could help you?" she said. "What if instead of being scared of them, you used them as tools?" Tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Pointed at the button. "The button needs to be tilted to go through the hole. Your claws are curved. You could use the curve of your claw to guide the button through." Looked at his claws, then he looked at the button. His ears slowly lifted. "Can I try?" he asked, his voice still quiet but with a tiny spark of hope. "Of course." Reached for the button. His claws came out, long and sharp, but this time he did not try to hide them. He hooked the edge of the button with one claw and tilted it. Then he used his other paw to push. The button slid through the hole so smoothly that gasped. "I did it," he breathed. "I actually did it." His claws retracted slowly, gently. For the first time they did not feel like a curse. They felt like a gift. Was the last one. He had spent the entire time bouncing around the room, ignoring everyone and everything. His coat was on his head again. Called, "Would you like to try?" Bounced over, "Try what?" "Buttoning your coat." Looked at the coat on his head. "Oh, I forgot about that." He pulled it off and held it in his small, round hands. "Buttons are boring. I want to bounce." "What if I bounce with you?" offered. His eyes went wide. "You can bounce." "I can try." Stood up and did a small jump. It was not very impressive, but squeaked with delight. Again. Jumped again. This time she held her coat and fastened one button while she was in the air. Stared. "How did you do that?" "Practice," said with a smile. "Want to learn." For the first time actually looked at his coat. He held it properly. He found a button. And he tried. He did not succeed. The button went everywhere except through the hole, but he tried. And that was all needed. At the end of the lesson had buttoned 2 buttons. Had buttoned 1, though she pretended she did not care. Had buttoned 3, using his claws like an expert. And had not buttoned any, but he had stopped bouncing long enough to actually attempt it. It was not much, but it was progress. And progress, knew, was how mountains were climbed. One small step at a time. Winter protocol was only 2 days away. The cubs were getting better at buttoning, but they were still too slow. They needed to be able to dress themselves quickly when the cold came. Had an idea. It was a risky idea, but sometimes the best lessons came from the riskiest plans. "Today," she announced, "we are going to work together." The cubs looked at each other nervously. They had spent the past week learning on their own. They had stayed on their own mats, in their own corners, doing their own work. The idea of working together was strange and scary. "I want you to pair up," continued. "Help each other button your coats. Sometimes it is easier to button someone else's coat than your own. Your hands can see better when they are not attached to the body." Leaned close to, "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. "They have barely spoken to each other." "That is the point," whispered back. The cubs did not move at first. They just stood there, looking at each other with uncertain eyes. Finally, took a small step forward. "I will help," she said quietly. Her voice shook a little, but she tried to sound brave. Looked surprised. No one had ever offered to help her before. On her planet, asking for help was seen as weakness. But the way looked at her, with her big eyes and trembling antennae, did not feel like pity. It felt like kindness. "Okay," said slowly, "and I will help you." That left end looked terrified, looked like he had already forgotten what they were supposed to do. "I will work with," said quietly. It was the first time he had volunteered for anything. The pairs faced each other, and stood very close, holding each other's coats. Tried to get to stand still, which was like trying to hold water in your hands. "Begin when you are ready," said. What happened next was something no one expected. Reached for his coat with her top 2 arms, but her other 4 arms did not know what to do. They waved around, trying to help. One of her middle arms grabbed a button on her own coat. Another arm reached for sleeve. Her bottom arms tangled with webbed fingers. "Wait," chirped, "let me just," but was already pulling away, which made things worse. The button from his coat somehow went through a hole on his coat. Now the 2 coats were connected. "We are stuck," said. Her voice was flat, like she could not believe what was happening. Tried to fix it. She pulled with her top arms and pushed with her middle arms, but that just made more tangles. Another button found another wrong hole. Now her sleeve was attached to his collar. "Stop moving," said, her gills fluttering rapidly. "You are making it worse." "I am trying to help," chirped, her antenna spinning in circles. On the other side of the room was having his own problems. Would not stop bouncing. Every time reached for a button, moved. The coat flew up, flew down, flew sideways. "Please hold still," begged. "I cannot," squeaked happily. "Holding still is boring." Made a desperate grab for the coat. His claws came out without warning. He did not mean for it to happen. He never meant for it to happen. His claw hooked into one of his buttons and pulled. The button did not rip off. Instead, it threaded through a hole on its own coat, now and were attached to each other. "Oh no," whispered. Looked down at the connection. Then he started bouncing again, dragging with him. "This is fun," squeaked. "This is not fun," cried, stumbling after him. Watched with his mouth hanging open. "Should I stop them?" Shook her head. Her eyes were wide, but there was a smile growing on her face. "Not yet. Let us see what happens." What happened was chaos. Bounced toward and dragging behind him. His flailing paws grabbed at the air and his claws caught on his coat. Now 3 cubs were connected. Spun around in surprise, which wrapped her coat around even. Tried to swim backward, a reflex from her underwater home, but there was no water here, only floor. She fell, pulling down with her. Kept bouncing, not understanding that he was now attached to a chain of falling cubs. He bounced once more, and then the weight of 3 other bodies finally stopped him. All 4 cubs collapsed into a pile. Coats were tangled, arms were trapped, buttons were in holes they were never meant to be in. 6 of his arms were trapped in 3 different coats. His gills were covered by his sleeve. Claws were stuck in his collar, and was at the bottom of the pile still trying to bounce. For a moment the room was completely silent. Then laughed. It started as a small sound, a giggle that she tried to hold back. But then it grew. It burst out of her like a wave, warm and bright and uncontrollable. She laughed so hard that tears formed in her eyes. The cubs froze. They had never heard a human laugh before. The sound was strange. It was high and low at the same time. It shook his whole body. It made her face turn pink. And somehow it did not feel like mockery. It felt like joy. His antenna twitched. She made a small chirping sound. It was the way her species laughed. Then his gills puffed in a rhythm, her own version of laughter. His ears lifted, and a purring sound rumbled from his chest. Even stopped bouncing and made a rapid clicking noise. giggling in the way. They were all laughing, together. A human and four aliens, tangled in coats and buttons, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the universe. Stared at them. He had never seen anything like this. Different species, different bodies, different voices, all making sounds of joy together. It was beautiful and strange and wonderful. "Are you going to help them?" asked. Wipe the tears from her eyes. In a minute, let them have this moment. The laughter slowly faded. The cubs lay in their tangled pile, breathing hard, still smiling in their own ways. "I cannot feel my arm," said, but she did not sound upset. "I cannot feel my face," added, but she was almost smiling. "My claw is stuck in something soft," said. "That is my ear," squeaked cheerfully. They looked at each other. They were trapped, stuck, ridiculous, but they were also together. For the first time, they were not in separate corners. They were not keeping distance. They were as close as four different beings could possibly be. And somehow it felt right. Knelt beside them. "Well," she said softly, "I think you have all learned something important today." "That buttons are dangerous?" asked. Smiled. "That sometimes the best things happen by accident, and that being tangled together is not so bad when you are tangled with friends." The word hung in the air. Friends. None of them had ever had a friend from another species before. It was a new word, a scary word, but also maybe a good word. Began to untangle them, one button at a time. And as she worked, she hummed a soft song from her home, a lullaby about stars and dreams and the warmth of being together. The cubs listened, and for the first time since they had arrived on the station, they felt like they belonged. Did not untangle them right away. Instead, she sat down on the floor beside the pile of cubs, looked at her with confusion, but she raised a hand, telling him to wait. The cubs were still catching their breath from laughing. They lay in their tangled mess, buttons holding them together like a strange puzzle. None of them complained. None of them tried to escape. "How does it feel?" asked gently. The question surprised them. No adult had ever asked them about their feelings before. On their home planets, cubs were told what to do and how to behave. They were not asked what they felt. Was the first to answer. Her 6 arms were trapped in awkward positions, but she did not seem to mind. "Warm," she chirped. "It feels warm." The people lived on a cold planet. Their ships were kept cold. Their blankets were thin. Warmth was a rare and precious thing. Being pressed against other living bodies, feeling their heat, was something had never experienced before. Went next. Her gills moved slowly, peacefully, as if she were floating in calm water. "Safe," she admitted. The word seemed to surprise even her. "I feel safe." On her planet was always alone. Children competed against each other from the moment they were born. Trust was weakness. Relying on others was dangerous. But here, tangled up with 3 other cubs, felt something she had never felt before. She felt like nothing bad could happen. Spoke in his small, quiet voice. "I can feel everyone's heartbeat," he said. His ears were up, focused and alert. "Your heart beats fast, and yours is slow and strong. Yours sounds like a drum." They had sensitive hearing, could hear sounds that others could not. He had always used this skill to stay away from others, to keep himself safe from danger. But now, listening to the heartbeats of his friends, the skill felt different. It felt like music. Was the last to speak. For once he was completely still. His round body was pressed between and held in place by buttons and fabric. He could not bounce. He could not roll. He could only be there in that moment with the others. "I like this," said quietly. His voice sounded different, calmer, smaller. "I always move because when I move I do not have to think, but right now I cannot move, and I think that is okay." Felt her heart swell. These cubs had been strangers a week ago. They had been afraid of each other, suspicious of each other, hiding in their own corners. Now they lay together in a pile, sharing warmth and heartbeats and feelings. This was what she had hoped for. This was why she had come to the station, not to teach children how to button coats, but to teach them how to connect, how to trust, how to open their hearts to beings who were different from them. "You know," said softly, "on my planet we have something called a hug. It is when you wrap your arms around someone to show them that you care. Sometimes humans hug for a long time. Sometimes whole families hug together in a big pile just like you are now." Santana perked up. "You do this on purpose. You get tangled together because you want to." "Yes," smiled, "because sometimes being close to others helps us feel less alone." The cubs were quiet for a moment, thinking about this. "My people do not hug," said. "We keep distance. We say that touching is for enemies, not friends." "My people only touch when we fight," added. "I am not allowed to touch anyone," whispered. "My claws are too dangerous." "I touch everything," said, "but no one ever touches me back." Looked at each of them. 4 children from 4 different worlds. Each one had been taught that closeness was wrong, dangerous, or impossible. Each one had been raised in loneliness. And yet here they were, tangled together, laughing together, feeling each other's warmth and heartbeats. "Sometimes," said carefully, "the things we are taught are not always right. Sometimes our families and our cultures teach us rules that keep us safe, but also keep us lonely. It is good to respect our traditions, but it is also good to question them to see if they still make sense." Was watching from across the room. His eyes were wet. He thought of his own childhood, growing up in a military family where hugs were rare and feelings were hidden. He thought of all the times he had wanted to reach out but had been afraid. "Stood up, now let me help you untangle." She worked slowly, carefully. As she freed each button, she explained what she was doing. She showed the cubs how the buttons had gone through the wrong holes, how a small mistake had created a big tangle. "This is what happens in life sometimes," she said. "We try to do something and it goes wrong. We make mistakes. We get tangled, but getting tangled is not the end. We can always untangle ourselves if we are patient." One by one, the cubs were freed, stretched her 6 arms with relief, took a deep breath through her gills, carefully retracted his claws, immediately started bouncing again but slower than before. But something had changed. Before, the cubs had kept distance from each other. Now they stood close. Arm touched shoulder, sat near, their bodies almost touching. The invisible walls between them had fallen. "Can we try the buttons again?" asked. Raised her eyebrows. "You want to try again, even after what happened?" All 4 cubs nodded. Together said, "We want to try together." Handed them their coats. This time something was different. This time they did not fight with the buttons. They helped each other. Whence arm got confused, guided it gently. Whence claw came out, held the button in place so it would not slip. Whence fingers slid off the button, used her extra arms to catch it. 1 button, 2 buttons, 3 buttons, 4. By the end of the hour, each cub had buttoned their entire coat, not by themselves but together. Each button was a small victory, made possible by the help of friends. Recorded everything. He knew that Commander would want to see this. He knew that the diplomats and politicians would analyze every second, but he also knew that they would never truly understand what had happened here. This was not about buttons. It was not about coats or winter protocol or temperature regulations. It was about 4 children who had been taught to be alone, learning how to be together. Watched them with a smile that reached deep into her heart. She thought of her mother back on Earth, who had always said that the smallest things could change the world. A button was a small thing. A hug was a small thing. A kind word was a small thing. But small things, repeated with love, could move mountains. And knew that today, in this playroom on a space station between 3 solar systems, a mountain had begun to move.